What are some common facts that people believe to be true, even if the existing evidence states the contrary? A lot of people think they can burn belly fat by doing crunches or slim their arms down by doing push-ups, but targeted fat loss isn't possible, and there's no evidence to suggest it is. Yeah, ab workouts just build up your core muscle and burn calories. The kitchen is where you lose the belly fat. Noted. Do abs in the kitchen. You can tap a block to see if it is loose in Jenga, which is stated quite explicitly in the rules, and F you everyone who said I couldn't. The most violent arguments I've had have been convincing patients with a viral cold that they don't need antibiotics. A person drowning is not likely to be flailing wildly and yelling like in the movies. Drowning can often happen with mostly silence, especially with kids. Read up on the signs. It might save a life. I was drowning and lost consciousness when I was 5. I was told I barely made a sound. I went under, sucked in lungs full of water when I tried to cry out in surprise and blacked out. If it wasn't for my dad's instincts and quick action, I'd be dead. That 30 used to be considered ancient back when the average lifespan was 25 or whatever. The average is offset by a huge number of child deaths. 30 was never ancient. Even hunter-gatherer societies had people routinely living into their 60s. It is rarely necessary to wait 24 hours before filing a missing person report. Cracking your knuckles too often will give you arthritis. Nope, no conclusive study has ever backed this up. It just releases the gas from the synovial fluid in your joints, which is neither good nor bad. Vikings never actually drank from skulls of enemies. This was based on a mistranslation of Old Norse poetry in which they refer to drinking from horns. That if you touch a baby animal, like a bird or rabbit, its mother will neglect it, and it will die. That is a myth. It was just a way for parents to get their kids to leave baby animals alone. Lightning never strikes twice in the same place. In fact it does, and frequently. You don't want to be there when it happens. People often confuse an independent media for an unbiased one. The most people only use 10% of their brain's capacity thing. Utterly ridiculous. The brain is a giant, metabolically expensive, staggeringly complex structure. Why on earth would our bodies grow something like that and then not use it? Edit. A lot of people in this thread have some very strange ideas about brains. Yes, if all your neurons fired at once, that would be extremely bad. The thing to bear in mind is that different areas and structures of the brain are highly specialized for certain tasks. Talking about an overall brain capacity is misleading. There are no unused areas of the brain. That Einstein was a bad student and was bad at math. It's just not true. He got average high marks and was really just disdainful of the structure of school. And he was good at math. Physics is like 90% math. I get why people share it. It's to make struggling students feel better about themselves. But can't we tell them about something else instead of lying? That shampoo has to make bubbles to be effective. Bubbles are artificially added just to let you know that you are doing a good job at cleaning your hair, and because you wouldn't buy a shampoo that doesn't foam now, would you? Also, it doesn't have to taste that bad. Not that I tried. Flavors and vomitives are added to prevent accidental poisoning. A few people still believe that opening windows before a tornado to even the pressure will save their house from damage. Some also still believe trailer parks attract tornadoes and that random sacred landmarks can protect cities from tornadoes. Your heart stops when you sneeze. Cutting your facial hair makes it grow in thicker. I had a full-on argument with an individual who firmly believed that genetics played no possible role in hair growth whatsoever. I have never been more perplexed or angry in my entire life. Sincerely, bald at 25. When you swallow gum, it stays in your body for 7 years. I'm guessing this was made up by parents to keep kids from swallowing bubble gum, though I'm not really sure why that would be a problem. Choking hazard maybe? It's entirely possible it was literally made up by a news organization that didn't have a story that day. The whole toilet paper situation started just because a random news show in Australia decided to run the story. The story caused people all over the world to believe toilet paper was running out, so they went and ensured exactly that by buying it all and then trying to return it when they realized how stupid the idea is. Lol. Also, that viral fact that you eat 7 spiders in your sleep every year. Disinformation created to prove that people will believe anything they hear. That's sensational. People still think an undercover cop has to tell you they're a cop. How does that even make sense? Months of preparations ruined on the first day because someone happened to ask the magic question. Cops are allowed to lie to you, and they will pretend to be your friend to get what they need from you. Side note, even if you're innocent of a crime, the first words from your mouth should be "I want a lawyer," and you don't provide any information until you have one. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. There's no such thing as an alpha wolf. The naturists who first described them spent years trying to clarify the matter, but the idea just caught on too hard. The dominant wolves in the pack he had been observing when he came up with the alpha wolf theory were, he later discovered, just the parents of the rest of them. Groups of more than one family do converge and engage in social activity, but the notion that wolves live according to a hierarchical structure is pure fantasy. Worms come out when it rains because they are drowning in their holes. No, not really. They mostly come out because when it rains heavily, they are able to survive on the surface for much longer and move around, finding new areas to feed and more worms to breed with. That cow is giving milk because that's how this animal work. They don't believe me when I'm telling them that she needs to have baby to start producing milk. I scrolled fairly far down and did not see what came to mind for me. A lot of people think blood is blue inside of the body and that it only appears red because of the oxygen or something in the air. I tried to explain this to a past coworker who was a former nurse and she wasn't having any of it. Turns out a lot of otherwise smart people believe that with no evidence, but blood is always red, just darker at some points of circulation in the body. Myth: the pool is definitely clean. It has such a strong chlorine smell. Fact: a strong chlorine-like smell, like the kind you associate with public pools, is actually an indication that the water is not chemically balanced. It might even be a sign that the pool needs more chlorine. Chicken is cooked when it is no longer pink and the juices run clear. In fact, it's cooked when it hits 75 degrees Celsius, 165 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's it. What it looks like depends on the cut. Chicken breast often has significant pink in it when it hits the temperature, which is why most people complain about dry, boring chicken, because they overcook it. On the flip side, wings can look cooked when they aren't, which is why they are a major source of food poisoning. The most important thing I learned working in a commercial kitchen: camels don't use their humps to store water. They use them to store fat reserves, because storing fat reserves around the body like humans would keep them too warm, so they have it all in one spot. Carrots make you see better. It was made up by the British Army when they got their new guidance system. That women's vaginas get loose when they've had a lot of sex. That humans swallow on average X amounts of spiders during their sleep throughout their lifetimes. It's an unfounded fact and made up urban myth that people like to parrot around the dinner table. That being in a cold place causes common cold. Edit: yes, I know that being in a cold place makes your immune system weaker, and because of that it's easier to get sick, but that wasn't the thing I was trying to say. 420 did not originate from the El Pointer Police or Penal Code for marijuana use. The use of 420 started in 1971 at San Rafael High School, where it indicated the time 420 when a group of students would go to smoke. That propensity to baldness comes from your mother's side of the family. There are several genes that control hair loss and they come from both sides of the family and aren't always expressed the same way. Edit: it has been pointed out to me that the primary gene for baldness is carried on the X chromosome, which is indeed from your mother. However, it is not the only factor, and it is not always expressed the same. There is no requirement to wait an hour after eating before swimming. Vaccines cause autism. There is no scientific evidence to show GMOs are any worse or better than non-GMOs. All they do is protect against pesticides and get a bigger yield. Sugar rushes. Some studies were done, and it's mainly just little kids acting like little kids, and their parents expecting them to act up, after having sugar from decades of saying that's what is supposed to happen. No evidence actually points to them being any more worked up. It's something I've brought up, and been ridiculed for it, and despite saying just Google it, I'm still perceived as wrong. Video games cause real life violence. There have been several studies disproving this. The Earth is flat, even though every other planet we have ever seen is not in fact flat. The fact that resistant and proof, i.e. water resistant and waterproof, is two separate things and are not the same. There is so many people that believe them to be the same. P isn't sterile. That the flu vaccine causes you to get the flu. I hear this every single year. I got the shot and 24 hours later I got the flu.